8.5 minutes left in the slot.
Thank you, Chair. And congratulations, Minister, for bringing this bill forward to the House. The power of inquiries referendum failed in 2011. I mean, in one respect, it was an incredible achievement on the part of the people of this country, because there was almost political consensus in favour of that referendum, that amendment to the Constitution. I'm pretty sure there was almost consensus in here as well. And a lot of the commentary at the time was very much in favour of it. Yet that the people chose otherwise. And to do so in the face of that, I suppose, political consensus, I think is an achievement. And it would be incredibly arrogant for us to say that, look, people got it wrong and we need to do this again. I think it's more important to look at what they decided and to say, well, we got it wrong. And we can debate then over, was it a timing issue? Was it a substance issue? Perhaps it was a campaign issue, but we got it wrong. And the people said no to that change to the Constitution. Nevertheless, we have in front of us now a bill on conducting inquiries. It is perhaps the most significant piece of legislation on reforming the practices of Dáil Éireann in the past 15 years or more. It is an incredibly important piece of legislation. And in no way should it be regarded as the politicians in here trying to sidestep the will of the people in that referendum. This is a separate thing completely. It goes nowhere near the kind of powers that were being inferred. But it is still a very important piece of legislation for the powers that it does give to the Oireachtas and to the Oireachtas committees. And it's important that we note that at the outset. It's also going to be an incredibly important bill in the context of the referendum that we're going to have on abolishing the Seanad in the next couple of months. Because if we're going to remove the second chamber of this House, then we need to be absolutely certain that the chamber that remains is able to do the duty that a parliament should do in a democracy such as ours, is able to be the check and balance for government, to stand confidently and to assert its opinions and to use its judgment in a way that a parliament should in the conduct of democracy and in working with a government of the day. So we need to be absolutely crucial to that, and I think that this bill is very much a part of ensuring that this chamber does stand on its own and stand confidently and competently on its own if the Seanad should be abolished. And I would be very much supporting that referendum when it does come. But it's not just about this piece of legislation, of course, which is important. It's about reforming the committee system, as many deputies have alluded to. And recently in the Fine Gael Parliamentary Party meeting, colleagues, myself and other colleagues have been putting forward different ideas about how we might reform the committee system, because we're very conscious of the mandate that we were all given, every single of the 166 deputies coming in here in 2011, to fix the economy, but also to reform the society and political structures in this country so that the mistakes that happened in the past that destroyed the economy could not happen again. That's our central mandate here. And at every step of the way, we need to be asking ourselves, are we doing enough? Are we reforming enough? Are we changing enough to make sure that can't happen again? And again, this bill is part of it, but there's more work that needs to be done in the committee system to do that. We need to give the committees more teeth. We also need to give the people serving on those committees more teeth. And I refer there, I think, to the use of the whip system in committees and the use of the whip on every single issue. And a very important issue is raised here in relation to this bill and the use of the whip system. We discussed it in the Public Accounts Committee, and Deputy Donoghue made a reference to it yesterday. Could you, in fact, whip a person on a committee holding an inquiry such as this? Could you whip that person on the terms of reference for that inquiry, on the findings that might be made, or the conclusion, or how the business was conducted? I believe you could not, because I believe it would undermine then the standing of the findings of that inquiry at the ultimate day. So this bill, when it is passed and when the first inquiry comes to happen off the back of this bill, is going to pose some interesting challenges to the whip system, and it's going to bring that debate on the use of the whip in Irish government, in Irish politics, front and centre. Now, there are those who are critical of the time it has taken for us to bring this bill to the House, and they're critical in the context of the banking inquiry because they want the banking inquiry to happen. But the amount of work that we have done on the Public Accounts Committee already, looking into the possibility of holding a banking inquiry, just lays out for you the amount of work that does need to be done and the significance of this piece of legislation and what we're trying to do. Bearing in mind what may happen with the Seanad in the autumn, bearing in mind what the people said in the referendum in 2011, we have to take our time with this. We have to be deliberate in what we consider and how we take it through committee and how we make amendments and everything else, because it is going to be such an important change for this Dáil. For those who say that for some reason, and I don't know how they say it, this government may not want to hold a banking inquiry, that is ridiculous. And that has to be refuted at every turn. It is part of our mandate here as elected to discover what happened around those events, not just on the night in question or the preceding weeks and months or the weeks and months following after, but what was happening in the years building up to that collapse. We need to look at that, to learn from that and understand it so that we can improve our systems here, but also that we can move on from that, a form of catharsis, if you like, for the country as a whole. And And that's why the government so much wants to hold a banking inquiry as soon as possible and deal with this piece of legislation and get it through and move to that stage. Because much of the work of this government has been in dealing with legacy issues from the past, trying to correct mistakes that were made, or where mistakes could not be corrected, try to negate the impact of their outcomes, and where it has had to, find the courage to do new things. This bill is doing new things. The referendum in itself was a new thing. The referendum on the Shannon will be another new thing. The protection of life during pregnancy is a new thing. The courage that this government has to deal with a legacy issue like that wasn't dealt with before. And when you look at the protection of life during pregnancy bill and how it's being handled at committee stage in particular, that paves the way for the kind of reforms that we should be seeing at every committee and how we deal with legislation, because it's incredibly important. And when I look at the debate on the protection of life during pregnancy bill, I look, of course, at the substance of what's being discussed, but I also look at how people are reflecting on how it's being discussed and the great standing it is putting, or returning, I suppose, to politicians and to politics and to the practices that we engage in this House and this committee system. And that's a good thing. We need to see more of that in committees. We need to be more transparent in our work. You know, we need to see us, people need to see us at our best and at our worst. They need to see us wrestling with these issues in public, consulting experts, taking our time and deliberating on important points for the country as a whole. Because, as I continue to say in here when I do get the opportunity to speak, when we pass a piece of legislation, that is the law of the land. And sometimes we may not be absolutely certain as to how that piece of legislation will be interpreted, as to unintended consequences of the enactment of that legislation, or to how a certain situation may come about that was never intended in that legislation. It happens all the time. We have to come back and we have to reform pieces of legislation and amend them. And that's fine. It's part of the political parliamentary process. But that's why it's so important that we do take our time with these important matters. Again, it's been touched upon by Deputy Humphreys and by Deputy Toomey about the extra resources that's going to be needed for committees. If you're going to give committees teeth, if you want them to be the kind of committees that we see in the other European parliaments that have successful committee systems, if the committees are to stand as a check and balance to the government, as the Shannon could have but never really did, it's going to need extra resources. That's going to mean extra people, extra money, extra facilities. That's just a fact. And we shouldn't be shy of spending a small amount of money where it's going to bring about great reforms and great savings, even financial savings, in the work that government does. Because potentially a committee or an inquiry we will set up will be the one that could just prevent a future economic collapse or a particular problem with the bank or regulation or something like that. And that's a money saving in the long term.
And 1 minute, Deputy.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't even begun to get to the substance of what I wanted to speak about because I went off script a bit. But this will lead to a banking inquiry, this bill. Now, we did a substantial amount of work in the Public Accounts Committee in preparing a preliminary report, which I wanted to actually read parts of into the record because we never had the chance to debate this report properly. I sat on the subcommittee, 6 of us did, and we put a lot of work into it together with the officials. It is comprehensive. There is a roadmap there for holding a banking inquiry. And we never got to debate it in detail because we're not debating enough committee reports here in the Dáil. Because again, part of the reforms we need to make is to bring the work from the individual committees here into the chamber so that those who don't sit on these committees can actually see the work that others are doing and that the public as a whole can see it as well. I think that's incredibly important. But the roadmap is there. I would just caution the kind of banking inquiry that we can have, given the powers conferred us under the Constitution. It's not going to be perhaps what people were hoping for, but it's still going to be incredibly important that the principles of the day come before a public committee to take public questions in full transparency and openness. I think that's going to be an important moment for the country, and I very much look forward to it coming. But as the Minister has just entered the House, I would like to congratulate him on this bill and repeat what I said. I think it is perhaps the most progressive piece of legislation in relation to reforming the Dáil that we've seen in the past decade or more. And I'm very proud that the government is doing this in conjunction with the other efforts for reform that it's currently engaged in. Thank you.